You ever look at a piece of wood, maybe a burl with more holes in it than a screen door, and think, I'm going to fill this with the color of a Caribbean sunset, only to end up with something that looks like a melted blueberry popsicle that's been rolling around under a car seat?
That is a very specific mental image, Tiger. Did we have a rough weekend in the shop?
I spent 14 hours on a walnut slab table. I wanted a deep forest emerald. I mixed the pigments, poured it, felt like a genius. I came back the next morning and it wasn't emerald, it was the exact shade of a lime Gatorade that's been left in the sun. It looked radioactive.
And that is why we are here today. Welcome to the Tiger Den. I'm Alex, and the man currently mourning his neon green walnut is Tiger. Today, we are cracking the code on color theory specifically for resin. Because let's be honest, mixing epoxy isn't like mixing paint. It's chemistry, it's physics, and sometimes it feels like dark magic.
It's the depth that gets you. In a painting, you're looking at a surface. With resin, you're looking through it. That third dimension changes every rule in the book. If you don't respect the light is going to make a fool out of you.
So, let's start with the basics. When someone walks into a craft store or looks online, they see powders, pastes, inks, and dyes. If I'm a beginner, my instinct is to just pick the one that looks pretty. Why is that a recipe for a lime Gatorade disaster?
Because pigments and dyes are different beasts entirely. Think of a dye like a cup of tea. It's transparent, you can see through it, but it's tinted. Pigment, on the other hand, is like throwing a handful of sand into that tea. It's suspended solids. If you want that river table look where you can see the grain of the wood 6 inches down, you need a translucent dye. If you use a mica powder, you're building a wall. You won't see the wood, you'll see a shimmering plastic barrier.
But those mica powders are so seductive. They've got the swirl, the metallic sheen. You're saying they're the heavy lifters while the dyes are the atmosphere?
Exactly, and here's where people trip over their own feet. Oversaturation. You need way less than you think. I see guys dumping in a tablespoon of pigment for a quart of resin. You do that, and you've killed the depth. You've turned your high-end project into a Lego brick.
Okay, let's talk about the actual theory part. We all remember the color wheel from 3rd grade. Red and blue make purple, but in resin, I've noticed that things get muddy really fast. Why does my sunset orange sometimes turn into over-fried chicken brown?
It's the ghost of the wood, Alex. People forget that wood isn't a neutral canvas. If you're pouring blue resin into a piece of cedar or cherry, which are naturally reddish or orange, you are essentially mixing blue and orange. What do you get when you mix those on the color wheel?
Mud.
Total mud. You've created a brown slurry where the two colors are fighting for dominance. If you want that blue to stay crisp, you have to seal the wood first, or you have to account for that underlying warmth. I like to think of it like wearing a tinted visor. Everything you put in that crack is being viewed through the lens of the surrounding timber.
So how do we avoid the mud? Do you have a trick for testing these colors before we commit to a $300 pour?
I keep a graveyard of small silicone muffin molds. Every time I mix a batch, I pour a little excess into a mold and write the recipe on a piece of tape. But here's the secret. Don't just look at the puck. Hold it up to the wood you're using. If you're using walnut, hold that blue resin puck against the dark chocolate brown of the wood. Does it pop? Or does it look like a bruise?
A bruise. You're really selling the aesthetic today, Tiger. But you mentioned depth earlier. How do we get those layers that look like you could reach your hand inside the table?
That's the layered veil technique. Instead of mixing one big pot of color, you mix your base clear, then you divide it. You might have one cup that's heavily pigmented, one that's just a ghost of a tint, and one that's pure crystal clear. You pour them in sequence or swirl them lightly. If you mix them all together in the bucket until it's one uniform color, you flatten the earth. You want the light to hit a particle of mica, bypass it, hit a layer of dye, and then bounce off the wood at the bottom. That's how you get that 3D holographic look.
It sounds like you're describing a painting, but you're doing it with a chemical reaction that's slowly turning into rock. How much time do you actually have to art this up before the resin decides it's finished being a liquid?
That's the ticking clock stress that keeps me young. Depending on the brand, you might have 40 minutes or you might have 4 hours. But here's a tip most people ignore. Temperature. If your shop is cold, the resin is thick like molasses and the bubbles won't leave. If it's too hot, it goes off like a firecracker and you're left with a cracked, yellowed mess. I like my shop at a steady 72 degrees. That's the Goldilocks zone for color manipulation.
Let's talk about the white problem. Every time I see a resin project that looks cheap, it's usually because the white looks like, well, White House paint. It's flat. It's opaque. How do you do white without it looking like you spilled milk on your project?
White is the hardest color to get right. It's the ego of the color world. It wants to take over everything. If you want a cloud look or that ocean foam, you have to use a specific white pigment paste, not just a powder. And you use a toothpick's worth. You want it to be wispy. The mistake is trying to make white a solid block. White should be the highlight, the foam on the wave, the marble vein. It should never be the main course.
What about the black hole effect? I've seen some tables where the resin is so dark it just looks like a void. Is there a way to make black interesting?
Oh, black is the most misunderstood color in the shop. Pure black resin is boring. But if you take a deep, deep charcoal and add just a hint of silver micro mica, or even a drop of violet dye, something you can't even see until the sun hits it, suddenly that void has a galaxy inside it. It gives the eye something to hunt for. I always tell people, don't just use the color out of the bottle. Marry two of them. Give them a reason to coexist.
I want to push back on the pro side of things for a second. We've talked about what looks good. But what about when things go wrong? Like, let's talk about fading. I've seen beautiful blue tables turn yellow or dull over 2 years. Is color theory useless if the sun is just going to eat your work?
The sun is the ultimate critic, and it's a mean one. UV light is the enemy of epoxy. Even the UV resistant stuff is really just UV delayed. If you're using light blues or clears, they will yellow over time. The trick is to use that to your advantage. If you know a piece is going in a sunny room, lean into the warmer tones. Ambers, oranges, deep reds, they handle the aging process with a lot more grace than a crisp, icy blue does.
So you're saying plan for the decay? That's very poetic, Tiger. Very circle of life.
It's just being a realist. If you build a pristine white and blue beach scene and put it in a south-facing window, in 5 years, that water is going to look like a stagnant pond. But if you build it with teals and greens, the slight yellowing of the resin actually makes the colors richer. You're working with the physics, not fighting them.
Okay, let's get into some specific Tiger tips. If someone is standing at their workbench right now, holding a stir stick, and they're about to pour their first big project, the one they've spent $100 on wood for, what is the one color mistake they are probably about to make?
They're about to mix the color in the dark.
In the dark?
Metaphorically, most shops have those buzzing fluorescent lights or those harsh LED shop lights. Those lights lean heavily into the blue spectrum. If you mix your color under those, and then move the finished piece into a living room with warm, incandescent lamps, the color will shift entirely. I always take my mixing cup to a window. Look at your color in actual, honest-to-God daylight. If it looks good under the sun, it'll look good anywhere.
That's a huge one. It's like picking out paint for a bedroom and realizing it looks purple once it's on the walls.
Exactly. And the other thing, don't be afraid of negative space. Beginners try to fill every square inch with action. Swirls, glitters, 3 different colors. The most sophisticated pieces I've ever seen, the ones that actually make you stop and stare, usually use color very sparingly. Let the wood do the heavy lifting. Use the resin to punctuate the story, not to scream over it.
So basically, stop trying so hard.
Well, I wouldn't put it that bluntly, but yeah, if you've got a piece of walnut with a grain that looks like a stormy sea, you don't need a neon pink resin river running through it. You need a color that feels like it grew there. I like to look at the lowlights in the wood grain, those dark, almost black streaks, and try to match my resin to that color. It creates a visual harmony that makes the whole piece feel like a single unit rather than 2 things glued together.
I think that's the takeaway right there. Harmony over highlights.
And for the love of all that is holy, wear your respirator. Color theory doesn't matter if you fried your lungs with fumes.
A very practical end to a very colorful conversation.
Just remember, your first few pours are tuition. You're paying to learn how the liquid behaves. Don't get precious about it. If it turns out ugly, sand it out or turn it into a shop stool. There's no mistake that can't be fixed with a fresh belt on the sander and a little more humility.
Wise words. Thanks for joining us in the den. Go make something beautiful, and maybe check the color in the sunlight first.
See you at the bench.